So I have Nick Reeves. He's with Magmadive. It is the dive shop that John and I went diving with a few years ago in Iceland. I don't think Iceland really needs any introduction, and we are running late. So I'm not going to babble on today. I am just going to hand you over to Nick and let him share Iceland with you.
All right, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. I don't do these webinars a lot from Iceland, so go easy on me. But yes, I work for Magmadive and also our sister company called Arctic Adventures. And what I'm here to do is to let you know, some of the awesome things you can do here in the country, also what's going on here in terms of the current climate and situation of Iceland for your holidays coming up in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to a map of Iceland, and this map that you can hopefully see on the slide, it's showing you how small this country is compared to every other one. This is super zoomed in off of the world map. Iceland's this little dot in the North Atlantic, just below a Greenland Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean, and it's a beautiful, beautiful country. Now, you've probably all heard of Reykjavik, which on the lower left of the map, you can kind of see the start of a big red line, and that is the sort of the busy hub of Iceland. When you first fly into the country, you're going to fly over sort of this vast field of what looks very bland, very plain land, and what you're actually looking at are volcanic fields of lava. And these lava fields head all the way almost to the distance of the capital city of Reykjavik. Then moving on from the map, you can see that big red line. It splits the island in half. Iceland is a very unique place as it runs right through a tectonic system. We have the tectonic plates of both North America and Eurasia. In Eurasia in the east, North America in the west, splitting the country apart. And this makes the island very volcanic. It's a growing country. It's getting bigger every year, and that's due to the hot lava and magma rising from the core of the earth up and through all these volcanoes that still exist in Iceland. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Reykjavik itself first, and then just to sort of navigate you through the country, we'll head first east, and we're going to follow the coastal route of this map. So we're going to first head then to Selfoss, onto the town of Vik in the south, and we're going to keep going around to the east and follow all the way to the top where that red line sort of finishes up there in Húsavík, to the second largest city of Iceland, Akureyri, there in the north. There's two little diver symbols up there, and then following back down the west coast, bringing us back to the Reykjavik capital. So my picture sort of plan is going to take you through this route, hopefully telling you a bit about the diving and some of the other activities you can do. So moving on to Reykjavik, it is a beautiful capital city. I've traveled a lot as a diver, as you can imagine. I've been diving for 16 years. I've been to places like Egypt and Thailand and Indonesia and America, and I've seen a lot of different diving climates. But the city itself here, it's so, I want to say cute is the right word. Multicolored buildings, small houses, but then when you see the designs of the churches and the museums, they're so grand in the architecture. They haven't wasted any money and thought and design into the plan of this city. So when you're not diving, Reykjavik is somewhere that you want to explore. You want to look at things like the Whales of Iceland Museum, the Aurora Reykjavik. I can see the Northern Lights behind me here. It's a cool trick, but they do exist. Not right now. We have currently in Reykjavik and the rest of Iceland 24 hours of daylight here in the summer. So although it's 11 p.m. here in Iceland, we are still, bright daylight outside. So I'm not at all sleepy, and I don't quite know when I will go to bed tonight, but it's going to be light either way. So I wear a sleeping mask, and that's how I get to bed in the evening. It's also the only capital city in the world to have its very own puffin colony just off the shores of Iceland. So I guess people interested in marine life might also be interested in the bird life of the country, and puffins popping in and out all the time just off the harbour of Reykjavik. But if you don't know what Reykjavik stands for, it actually stands for Smoky Bay. And that was due to the first settler in Iceland. And this was around the year 870, this is a long time ago, coming down from Norway and obviously pulling women and children from the Celtic nations of Ireland and Scotland to come to Iceland and grow their population. They settled here and made new colonies, new tribes all around the country. But Ingolfur, who was the first settler here in Iceland, chose Reykjavik. And how he found the spot is he threw some pillars into the ocean, and he waited and went until he found those pillars again on the nearby beaches of the coastline of Iceland. And one of those pillars appeared here in Reykjavik. But he saw the hot springs blowing smoke and lava and everything out into the landscape and the air above the ground, and he called it Smoky Bay. Reykjavik, that's what it stands for, Smoky Bay in Icelandic. Now, one of the things you can see in the pictures here, of course, are those small dwellings that the Icelanders used to live in, and the multicolored design, actually no more necessary than to stand out in the snow and, of course, to cheer up the country in the very dark winters that they have. So it was quite often popular to use bright colors. The middle picture is the Hallgrímskirkju church, and the only way that you can see all those little multicolored houses is to take a visit to this grand Lutheran church right in the middle of Reykjavik, go all the way to the top, and you can see all those little houses down below. And that's the only place you can get that photograph, is at the top of the church. And then similarly down in the bottom picture, hopefully you can see, is the Harpa Museum and the what we call Pertlan, which is like a big dome. They have a cinematic dome movie that you can watch inside, and then they have the only artificial ice cave that you can see all year round here in Iceland. So if the weather is bad when you get here, don't panic. You have Pertlan, and you can go and see some of those features that exist around the country. And then the other thing on my list here, of course, is the City of Peace and John Lennon. John Lennon, of course, as you know, assassinated, crime in itself. But Yoko Ono took it upon herself to build a memorial here in Iceland for John Lennon, which is activated in October every year, and then it deactivates in December every year. And this 4,000-meter high beam of light extends into the skies over Reykjavik during the winter months to commemorate the existence of John Lennon and his progress towards peace and world peace that he was going for. So Iceland does take a bit of a pride in being a nation of peace. Which, of course, you would know yourself, as President Reagan and another of the USSR met here in Iceland at the Hotfi House, which is on the coastline of Iceland, to kind of try and end the nuclear possession of each country. They wanted to get rid of nuclear weapons, end the Cold War, and Iceland wanted to be part of that. So this is where the peace talks were held, the peace summit to end the Cold War. Never quite happened. We all do still have nuclear weapons, unfortunately, but the fight is still going. We're trying to get there. So City of Peace. And currently, I think last week, voted the #1 most peaceful country in the world. So if you're looking for somewhere safe to go on holiday, Iceland's the place, and I can back it up. There's nothing dangerous going on here at all. Of course, the population of Reykjavik is around 216,000 people. The total population of Iceland is around 350,000 people, and that's not a lot. So the bulk of people living in Reykjavik, that's where the jobs are, it's where the community is, the economy is, and then it starts to get very sparse as you go around the country. This is good for you guys. You're coming on holiday. One of those first places you're going to arrive is the Reykjanes Peninsula. Some great dive sites in this location, and not to mention some places to relax after you go diving. So looking at the Reykjanes Peninsula, picture in the top right there, that is the Blue Lagoon. This is the place people would normally go at the end of their holiday. It's kind of the geothermal water that comes through the ground and provides a lot of the heating and electric for the country. It's very green and environmentally friendly, and it produces these sort of natural hot pots that you can swim in all year round outside. And you'd think, is it not like -12 in Iceland? It's not actually. It's most of the time actually more around, in the winter, maybe 0 degrees, and then anywhere between 5 and 15 degrees in the later parts of the year. Blue Lagoon water actually sits at around 38 to 42 degrees as a hot pot to swim in. It's beautiful. Not to mention the minerals, which are very good for your skin and your well-being. But the middle picture is the one I want to look at. The Snafflesness Peninsula is in the Atlantic Ocean. It's a rugged environment, but we have got some dive sites that we can get to. And one of those dive sites is Clafervatn Geothermal Lake. I really like this dive site. And one of the cool things, and if you've never been in one, is in the top right there is a super Jeep. It's a Mercedes cab with all those Mercedes comforts that you'd think would be in a car. Super nice. But it's then built onto a Ford frame, massive, 55 to 60-inch tires, depending on the vehicle, and a snorkel on its front. And that's going to get you to those places where you can't just kind of run up to the beach and dive in the water. The Super Jeep's going to really get you around the lake to the geothermal area, which is those hot springs underwater, producing all these bubbles that come out of the ground on the picture on the left. So as you're diving through the water, you might think there was more divers below you. It's not. It's actually natural gases coming out of the ground created by the volcanic systems underneath. It's a really cool thing to see. And then where the volcanic rock disappears and turns into sand, you can actually see the sand rippling and bubbling away as that constant stream of sulfur comes up through the ground and into the water. Now, another one of the dive sites here in Reykjanes Peninsula is Bjarnagjá, and that's what they call it here in Iceland. It actually means Barney's Crack. And as a bit of a comedy, most dive sites in Iceland are named after some guy's crack. I don't know why that is, but it's pretty funny to me. But they are. They're small cracks in the volcanic systems. As the tectonic plates in Iceland are pulling apart every year by about 2 centimeters, it creates these splits where fresh water pools inside and creates these diving environments that we know. And Bjarnagjá is an abandoned crabbing station. They used to lower whale bones with meat still on them into the crack, and the crabs would feed and get bigger, and then they'd sell them on to the seafood restaurants and so on. After it was abandoned, of course, divers appropriated the site, and now we go in and we see these beautiful anemones growing all over the bottom of the crack underneath. There's also a shipwreck in there that was put in for the filming of a movie, which I can't quite tell you the name of yet due to top secret. I'd have to kill you if I told you. No, I don't know. I've signed an NDA. I'm not allowed to tell anyone what the film is at the moment, but there's a ship down there that you can now dive also in the crack, and it's great for photography. But the nice thing with Bjarnagjá is there's 2 caverns at either side, which you can dive inside, and it's a bit spooky. The light comes in, but it's very narrow. Super clear visibility, 100 meters. But the unique thing about this site is that it mixes with seawater from the beach, which is only 200 meters away. And that creates these haloclines. Messes with your vision a bit on your descent, but when you get down there and you look back up, all the algae that's bouncing off the walls either side, it floats there like jellyfish. It doesn't sink, it just sits there in the middle of the water, again, making for some really cool photography. So there's Bjarnagjá as a dive site. So you can see there the old crabbing station buildings sort of abandoned on the coastline, and that's super clear water there at the surface. And you can see all the algae growing on the shallow parts, and then the sort of deeper blue indicating that that is the deep drop off down into the middle. We would enter the water over by the building, and we would exit in the shallow part up on the right side there. One of my favorites. But then heading round from Reykjanes Peninsula, the next part of Iceland we call quite simply in English, the south coast. And there's no real Sutherland's coast is the term they would use here. Sutherland, we use south coast. And this is where you go if you want to see waterfalls, you want to see volcanoes, you want to see really nice sort of churches that they would have had built by all the Danish occupation here in Iceland. And of course, the Icelandic horse is something to see. So the first thing you would come across driving to the south is Seljalandsfoss. Now you might ask me, what does that name mean? Seljalandsfoss literally means land that is for sale around the waterfall. So massive farming communities around here. And the benefit that they have is this beautiful backdrop of fresh water. Seljalandsfoss falls down from about a 60-meter drop, but the main thing here is the cave at the back of the waterfall. So if you're someone that likes photography with water, you're going to get behind the fall, and at the right time of day, you're going to get that beautiful orange sunset coming in, shining through the water, beautiful silhouettes, and really one of the nice places. But one of the most unadvertised parts of this place is a second waterfall, which I don't have a picture of because we don't advertise it too much. If you walk along the path where most tourists don't realize it's there, is Glúi Frabwi, which means dweller in the gorge. And you actually hike into the mountain through a crack, and you have a waterfall inside. And it's one of those fairy tale waterfalls. It's pouring right down inside the mountain. You have a sort of a 50 by 50 meter area that you're standing in. You're getting sprayed. There's rainbows forming in the light and the refraction that's coming off the water. Really, really pretty place. So if you're coming to Iceland, remember Seljalandsfoss. It's one of the places you want to stop for sure, especially if you're a photographer. Skogafoss. Now this is a strangely named one for us, and obviously we've not been in Iceland for its whole existence. Skogafoss means forest waterfall. There are no trees around Skogafoss anymore. We suspect a lot of the trees destroyed in past volcanic eruptions. The Vikings would have used a lot of the wood for their survival, but again, a 70-meter drop waterfall leading to a pool at the bottom, and that waterfall is most famous for its formation of rainbows, and usually double rainbows over the side. Fantastic place to, again, get your photos. Now, a lot of you may have heard about Iceland originally back in 2010, which was its most famous volcano, Eyjafjallajökull. If you can't say it, it's I forgot my yogurt in English is the easiest way, but you know, you guys have it as E15. I don't know what you guys in the States called it, but here Eyjafjallajökull basically exploded in 2010 and unleashed a massive ash and dust cloud into the atmosphere, spreading all across Europe. The eruption in Iceland was actually quite minor, so the population didn't feel it too much, other than the fact that they couldn't fly anywhere. And that's because the ash cloud was interfering with the engines of aircraft. So most countries had to ground their fleet before they, you know, the planes couldn't make it anymore. But this little volcano put Iceland on the map, and tourism exploded after 2010. People wanted to know why this happened, where it came from, and when they researched, they found this little country that, you know, put these locations on the map as somewhere to visit. And there are still to this day active volcanoes in the country just waiting to erupt. You know, we're seeing activity all the time. I've been here for 4 years, and all I want to see is an active erupting volcano. You might think that's a bit weird, you know, but as a photographer, I want to see this stuff. You know, and it's not unsafe in terms that they have monitoring systems here. They can tell when they're going to erupt. They can tell the pressure inside the volcanoes. You know, there's a lot of stuff they're doing scientifically to ensure the safety of people while they're here in the country. But passing Eyjafjallajökull, you come to the sort of the middle town in the south. It's tiny. This is the village of Vik, and this is one of the only places, if you see the picture in the top left side, where you can see an active and live flow of hot magma. Actually coming through a pipeline and onto volcanic rock that's already existing on the ground. So they're showing you what would actually take effect. And then the second display, they pour it over ice. And the reason they show you magma going over ice is because most of Iceland's volcanoes are underneath very large glaciers. And these glaciers, they don't react well to superheat, and it creates sort of explosions and mass chunks of ice being blown out of the glacier and into the lands below, and mass flooding, of course, as the glaciers melt. So this little center in Vik here is showing you that reaction in small scale there. But of course, you're standing in a room with active magma flowing out. You can feel the heat, and it is something else. Also in Vik, we see this statue in the top right. This symbolizes the cod wars of Iceland. One of their biggest markets is fishing. And of course, the UK, United Kingdom, didn't take very well to that. Iceland was very close to their fishing waters, and there was a lot of difficulties in the past about fishing. So when the peace was made between the United Kingdom and Iceland about fishing rights, two statues were made, one here in Iceland and one in Hull in the United Kingdom, and both of these statues face each other exactly. So if you come to Iceland and stand in Vik and face the way the statue in the top right is going, you're actually looking at Hull in the United Kingdom. Good navigational marker. Then we have Vik Church. And Vik Church is a special place because the windows of this church are one of the few buildings that have stained glass windows. And it's not Christian symbols you see on here. It's pictures of fishermen and Icelandic families going about their daily lives. And that's what they have on the stained glass on the church. And it's one of the buildings that was used as inspiration for a very grand concert hall here in Reykjavik called Harpa. And all the windows are made of separate pieces of glass which change color and light up through the night. And they can project pretty much whatever color pattern they want onto these windows. And Vik Church was the inspiration for that. And the last one of this image is the bottom right, the lupin, or the Arctic lupin specifically, was brought here to Iceland to encourage growth and to stabilize growth all over the landscape of Iceland. Little did they know it was a very vicious weed that during windy months spreads like wildfire. And now through the year, the nickname of the country is the Purple Island, as the lupin, they can't control it. It's just growing crazy. But if you're not a farmer and a photographer, again, something very nice to see and look at. And then further along the south, we come to one of the most famous, and it is my favorite place in Iceland. Personally, it's the Diamond Beach and the Glacier Lagoon. It sits right on the edge of the largest glacier in Europe, Vatnajökull. We have a colony of grey seals and common seals living in this lagoon. You can see the beautiful face of one we got right up close to on the rib in the lagoon there. And these icebergs, they break off from the glacier as it calves off its front face into this tidal lagoon. And then they start to float for a few days till the mass changes, and then they capsize. When you see these glaciers flip over in the water, it's a fantastic sight to see. Fortunately, no diving in here, as of course there is mass current pulling out to the ocean and flipping glaciers. It's not the safest place for a diver to be, and the national parks of Iceland just quite simply don't allow it. But it is beautiful for photography. You can see there in the back, the mountain there with the glacier on top and all those icebergs floating through the lake at the bottom. Pretty awesome. And one of the other things, if you're not so into glaciers, for example, are the Icelandic horses. These guys are some of the best horses. I used to ride a lot in Scotland, which is where I'm from originally. But coming to Iceland 4 years ago, these horses here are kind of like your best friends. If you have like a household dog, Labrador, golden retriever, these guys, they'll walk right up to you. They want you to scratch their ear, make friends. Super nice horses. A lot of people call them ponies. It's actually incorrect. The Icelandic pony is a horse, and the locals get pretty annoyed if you call them a pony. But the reason most people confuse ponies, they're very short, super short animals. But the big fuzzy fringes and wild, untamed appearance of the horse, don't let that fool you. They are in great control. They have a 5-gate run, which means when you sit on the horse and they go into gallop speed, you're going to sit perfectly still on top. The legs go around like a train. You don't even know you're moving. Super comfortable animal to ride, and of course, your best friend. So if you come into Iceland, definitely want to get on a horse. Now, if you head down the south coast, eventually you're going to have to head to the north, which is great for us because you're going to come to some more diving locations up here, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But I can't help but talk about Christmas if you're coming to Iceland in the winter months. North Iceland is Christmas. The town of Akureyri is the second largest city in Iceland. It's completely opposite on the map from Reykjavik, but they only have a population of about 20,000. So if you're not into crowds, get to Iceland and get straight up to the north into Akureyri. You're going to see this beautiful central church that they have, again, very similar to design as Reykjavik, but they have the 24-hour Christmas house located there. Christmas trees, you know, they have the Santa Clauses, and of course the Icelandic Yule lads and Grilla the witch, which is what they believe in here. So in December, the kids start to get ready for the very scary 13 Yule lads, and who are going to, you know, they have nicknames. One is kind of like the sausage stealer and the door slammer and the spoon licker, the skyr gobbler, skyr, Icelandic yogurt. And, you know, they do something to torment the kids all through Christmas. And then the witch, of course, for bad children, she's waiting to catch them and turn them and boil them into a stew. You know, that was for so many years in Iceland used to scare children to doing their chores, going to bed, and they would get good presents at Christmas. They've been turned into a bit more of a positive Santa Claus feel now in the modern days. But, you know, when you go to the 24-hour Christmas store, they believe in the true Icelandic Christmas of the 13 Yule lads. But what you're here as divers to look at, of course, in the north, we have Stritton diving. Now you can see the harbour there in Hjalteyri in the middle picture. That is the town in the north where we have the fjord, where we enter the water to get to two sites, Little Stritton and Big Stritton. And again, we tend to do Little Stritton as the first dive site to get you warmed up and prepared and ready, as Big Stritton is, although shallow to start with, a very deep dive site, kind of like diving on a drop-off. And to explain it further, these are hydrothermal chimneys that have formed by almost 11,000 years worth of hot sulfur and minerals pooling out of the hot springs on the ocean floor and forming these kind of limestone pillars that come out of the ground. But that hot water and those minerals have encouraged a lot of life to go around there in the north. And one of those in the top left picture there, that is Stephanie, the wolffish. Stephanie there, very good friends with the owner of Stritton Dive, who is up there in the north, checking out the dive site on a day-to-day basis, often comes to say hello. And same as you guys, if you go down there and you're just diving around, for sure she's going to swim up and say hi. Although Erlington, the guy that lives in the north of Iceland, very upset to find out that Stephanie, and don't tell him I told you, is actually a boy. But that's just a joke that we have here in the country. He named her Stephanie, thinking she was all very friendly, and his girlfriend's a lad. But they still get on well, and Stephanie's still around there up in Stritton. But the wolffish, very ugly. They burrow into holes in the ground around the seabed floor and around these hot springs. And there's always usually two. One goes out to find the food and brings it back, as they tend to mate for their existence at the bottom. And if one doesn't come back, it's because they've decided to move on and find another relationship with another wolffish. There's a close-up there of the very beautiful Atlantic species, the wolffish there, with Erling from Stritton Dive in the north. Now the geothermal chimneys, you can see kind of how the digital representation looks there on the picture. These long spires coming out of the ground, and at various points up and down these chimneys, there are holes forming in the mass, which you can see that hot sulfur and hot water pulling out of these chimneys. It creates a kind of a white base around the chimney where the hot water is escaping. It starts at around 15 meters, and the deepest point of the chimney would probably be around 75 meters to the seabed floor. So really, any certification can dive here. It just determines how deep you're willing to go and what certification you have. But everybody can have a go on Stritton and head back up to the rib above. But you spiral around the chimney, dive around it, looking for the macro life and of course the fish that have gathered around the structure. One of the other sites in the north is Nesgau. You've probably all heard of Silfra, which I'm coming to at the end. It's like the main attraction. But Nesgau is kind of the Silfra of the north. It sits at the tail end of the separating tectonic plates in the north. And then what we see is this very shallow split sort of double-sided channel going all the way out into the North Atlantic at the other end of Iceland into the Greenland Sea. And there you can see in the picture, super clear again. You've got more than 100, 150 meters visibility in that crack up there. And again, some sort of great opportunity for photography. So Nesgau is one of those places that we visit, and again, good for either diving, or if you prefer to take it a bit easier up there in the north, you can actually just kind of swim through the channel, free dive a little bit. Great for free diving as well. Litla. I love this place. This is a warm, hot river, sits at around 18 degrees Celsius. So that's warm for you guys in America. I'm not sure about conversions to Fahrenheit, but 18 degrees Celsius, that's super warm. You don't need a hood, you don't need gloves. You get into the water and you see those lovely pooling, sort of bubbling spots coming out of the sand. And again, that's hot water and sulfur coming out into the water. And then we have this sort of beautiful sort of algae and seaweed growing up out of the floor there. And it's a river that you're swimming in, and it's all heading out into the ocean. And it's unique. The whole of the bottom is a hot spring, and it's pumping that hot water into the river, and that's what makes it a really pleasant site to visit. Litlau, really, really nice site. Keep it on your list. Now, after some very cold diving in the north, before we head on back to the south of the island and to the west, Vok baths and GOC. These are some of the newest additions to the country here. Vok baths there on the left, you can see that beautiful hot tubs built into the lake. Now, you might think they're pumping hot water into those. They're not. There's a funnel at the bottom that's bringing water through a hot spring from the bottom of the lake to fill those baths. So when you get super heated there in the 40 degree Celsius baths, you can roll over into the lake as you're sort of needing to cool down and climb back in. And then when you go inside, they've got a really healthy tea bar for healthy teas and drinks after your hot bath in the lake. This is great after diving to warm up after that cold Atlantic dives. And then GOC, they've gone for the infinity pool. So when you're sitting on the cliffs of Husavik looking out, you can just see across the fjord to the mountains ahead with all the snow still existing on the top there in the north. You're only a few miles from the edge of the Arctic Circle at that point. So, you know, you're pretty close to Northern Lights territory and of course, just open ocean. So beautiful views out of Husavik's GOC. As we head back down from the north, we're going to come to the west of Iceland into an area known as Snæfellsnes Peninsula. All of you have heard of this before, but you just don't know the name. The name Snæfellsnes is in Iceland, it means snow mountain, but you'll know it as the journey to the center of the earth. Originally from the novel of Jules Verne, or the new movie, or the newish movie from Brendan Fraser, all filmed here in Iceland. The volcano that sits on this lone standing peninsula on the west of Iceland is said to be the route to the center of the earth. And it is it's not extinct, but it's a dying volcano here in Iceland, but it has some very weird magnetic fields going around it, birds fly weird around the area, and the weather patterns are very strange. So it has a very mythical presence in Iceland, and they believe a great source of energy. So all the geothermal power plants in Iceland have a central building where the roof points towards Snæfellsnes Peninsula to harness that energy as good luck as power source for the country. But why Snæfellsnes is actually nice. It's one of the original fishing areas of the country, and one of the areas where you can see the original churches, like the Deer Church there on the first picture, painted black, stands out in the snowy filled area of the snow mountain of Snæfellsnes. Black really stood out well. So a lot of the buildings were like this, but very sparse Lutheran inside, not a lot of high decorations and luxuries in there, but the building itself very pretty in the snowdrop. Great lighthouses, and then of course the lonely mountain there, Kirkjufell, one of the most photographed places in Iceland, and that is because it is a standalone pyramid mountain sitting in front of a beautiful waterfall, and people just want to capture it on photo. I guess they search for it and see it everywhere, and want to get their own style and picture of the area. But in the journey to the center of the earth, why I like Snæfellsnes, the true history here, this Icelandic gentleman in the middle picking up what they call a lifting stone. There's a beach here called Djúpalón Sandur, means deep black sand beach, literal translation. But the fishermen would come here, or people who wanted to be fishermen, and they'd pick up the stones, and if they could lift them, that would determine if they were able to be a fisherman or not. And the stones ranged from 25 to 150 kilograms. And believe it or not, at 25, you didn't pass. It had to be 75 to 150 is what you had to lift in order to make it onto the Icelandic fishing fleets. Then you have Baldur of Snæfellsnes. He was a half-Titan, half-human man that discovered the peninsula and named it the Snow Mountain, as he found this snowy-covered peninsula and made his home here. But due to some tragedy in his family, Baldur of Snæfellsnes disappeared onto the glacier mountain and never to return. But the people, knowing that he was half-Titan, prayed to him as the protector of the peninsula, and they figured that the Titan protecting the mountain gave them good luck and good fortune as an area in the country. So Baldur of Snæfellsnes, still today, named the place Snow Mountain, and as a Titan protects the mountain to this day. But beautiful black sand beaches and little fishing towns all around, and beautiful churches. Good place to drive. There's a great place here called Ytri-Tunga. Now you can dive here and you can swim here. And again, this is another place where you can get in with seals and the seal colonies and get in the water with those curious sort of dog-friendly animals that will come up to say hi. They're not shy here. They have no natural predators, and they just want to come and say hello. But as you're diving around, or on the surface, you're going to see the beautiful geology of Iceland, these basalt rock formations. Excuse me. These basalt rock formations, which are sort of these long columnar, hardened from volcanic eruptions in the past, where they've super cooled at the impact of water, creating these great shapes along the coastline. Rope lava there on the bottom image to the side. And then what the Icelanders believe whenever they see a face in the rocks is a petrified troll. And this is created by the image there at the top corner. You see the two eyes in the face there. So all around Iceland, as you drive, there is some myth and legend about a troll who tried to take on a fishing fleet, kidnap some women, grab some food, and it petrified in the daylight in the summer months of Iceland, as there was no nighttime. And they're stuck forevermore in the rocks. And again, with the geology, caves exist all over Iceland. Not just for going in on land, you can dive in some of them as well. But these caves, beautiful formations of stalactites and stalagmites all over the surface and the ceilings of those caves. And just as you can see there on the image, it creates a really fantastic site for photography, or just to, you know, imagine further going into a volcanic eruption. Layers and layers of hot magma would have flown through these caves to create all of this surface area and sort of passageways underground. As the lava cools, it forms this hard shell, creating the cave until, like turning off a tap, the magma sort of eventually runs out, creating this sort of hollow area that you can walk through. So lava tunnels are in no shortage here. So if you wanted to get in to a cave and see what's going on, everywhere. But of course, coming to Iceland is not just for sightseeing. We have activities here due to these extreme landscapes that we have. If you're a bit more of an adventure goer, you can get out there and go snowmobiling. We have plenty of those. You can get up onto the glaciers and ride up there onto the tops of the snow-covered mountains and see what's going on from a higher view of Iceland. Or if you're just a speed junkie, you can get on those snowmobiles and have a thrush around the glaciers. Great fun. One of the first things I did when I got into the country, and I still like it right now. If I could do it every weekend, I'd be up there on the glacier. And then, of course, diving. You know, when you come to Iceland, this is, again, what you're watching for. And one of the things that snowmobiling actually allowed us to do is to dive in a submerged, melted ice cave. I was part of that 2 years ago here in Iceland, and I was just stunned at the opportunity. I never thought for one moment in the 16 years of diving that I've done, after being in all these hot countries, that I would find myself between two sheets of ice inside a cave on a glacier diving. We got on the snowmobiles with a trailer, we towed all the dive equipment up to the top of the glacier and descended into the cave. Nothing like it. And Kuba, right there at the top, this beautiful waterproof orange stream suit. We always use them for pictures because the orange comes out really well in the cameras. Great for Magmadive, that's our color scheme. But yeah, glacier cave, awesome experience. And I would say to everyone, if you can get to have a go at that at some point in your life, do try. It's not always possible every year, as the glaciers are always changing shape, you know, but if it is something that we can sort out, we will try. And there is us three, me in the middle, Kuba on the right, and Lena there on the back, all sitting on a snowmobile, ready to, you know, get into the dive. But other than diving on glaciers, of course, you can just do a bit of ice climbing, and you can also go hiking. So if you've never been on a glacier before and you just want to see what it's all about, it's really simple, guys. You get some spikes to put on your feet, a very good guide to sort of take you up there and tell you all about the formations of glaciers in Iceland and how they are changing every day, you know, all over the course of the year. I went on this glacier 4 years ago, the one in the picture, and it does not look the same today. It's always changing. So even if you've been here before, you're going to see something new. Such as ice caves. The picture here is of a Katla ice cave, which is also on the south coast of Iceland. The Katla ice cave, beautiful blue ice tones going through the ice there. But one of the things that's unique about Iceland is the glaciers have volcanoes underneath. So you're going to see layers of ash inside the ice, which makes it almost kind of like an onyx rubidium as you're walking through. So you see these beautiful patterns, blue ice and black shades as you're walking through. So these caves are stunning and great again for photography, but channels and channels of areas that you can walk through and explore. And then for those a bit more extreme, rafting. You can get in some of those glacial rivers, throw yourself off the cliffs, doing some cliff jumping, and of course, like the back image there, as the rafts bounce over the rapids, coming down the Hvita River from the fast-flowing waterfall of Gullfoss, it's a great and enjoyable activity. Lots to do. But ultimately, I want to talk about diving around Reykjavik. When you fly into the country, it's one of the first places you're going to be, and it's the easy place. You're going to get out 40 minutes here, half an hour there, very close to the city. And as part of Magmadive, you know, we can get you through all these places. quite easily. We have the vehicles and we have the staff and the people who are eager and they enjoy it. I enjoy it. We want to get you out there. So the fame and fortune of Iceland, of course, is a dive site called Silfra. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's one of the most clear diving locations in the world. And, you've seen it. You've seen it in dive magazines. You've seen it in the dive shows. You've seen it on the news. It's just stunning. And unless you've been here yourself, guys, you've got to come. You've got to see it. I didn't expect that I would enjoy a cold water dive site so much when I came to Iceland. I liked hot water countries in the beginning, and it totally converted me. And I love getting into that every single day. That dark volcanic rock down the sides of the dive site and that sort of Bahamian blue water going through. I feel like I'm in a tropical country, except 2 degrees Celsius. It's super cold, and that's because it's coming from the melting glacier of Langjökull in the sort of the Midlands of Iceland. The melting glacier takes about 100 years for that water to filter its way through all the volcanic rock on its way to the entry point of Silfra, making it clean enough to drink, clean enough to dive in, and 100+ meters visibility for you to take your pictures, as you can see there in the image. And guys, not really edited, these photographs. You're not, if I was to show you an edited one, it would be a bit sharper, be a bit clearer. The light rays, the diver in the background, the rocks, you can get all that without fancy filters and fancy cameras. Most of the pictures of Silfra are taken on GoPros. It's super clear. And just come and enjoy the site. It's a beautiful place to get in the water. There's Kuba again. He's our Aquaman there. His orange and yellow fins. This is the green algae, which in Iceland they nickname troll hair. It grows super long in the summer months of Iceland, and it just sort of layers like a carpet over the volcanic rock in Silfra, which is very porous, which is how it sort of latches on and grows out. But it provides this great color contrast in the water, as you can see from the photograph. It's almost neon green, super bright colors. And yeah, it's just algae, but remember here in Iceland they call it troll hair, as it grows all across the underwater scapes of Silfra. And there you can see the cathedral, which is the end of the Silfra sort of dive site before you head into the lagoon area. This is the 21-meter deep sort of white sand bottom and very large volcanic rock cascade coming down either side. This is where most of the pictures are taken that you see in the magazines and online, and it's also where you're going to enjoy the best part of diving through the channel here. You sort of flip over at the bottom, you get those beautiful silhouettes at the top, and that white sand creates great contrast in your pictures. But yeah, cracking end to a beautiful dive is the cathedral. Now, not far from Silfra, the large lake that the channel would open up into has a wealth of other dive sites. So you can head into other areas. Again, David's Skjal, it's another man's crack, David's crack, heads in, and it looks very like Silfra to begin with, but it splits off into 2 channels inside the lake, and the largest lake in Iceland, Thingvallavatn, which I'm very proud to say that is me reeling out a line there in David's crack. As I'm sort of under the ice sheet above. Silfra never freezes. So if you're a bit panicked about having ice over your head, Silfra never has any ice. But further out into the lake, the water can freeze, and at certain times of the year, we can get under the ice here in David's Skjal, and following correct techniques, laying out a line, making sure you can get back to the right exit point, of course, is great fun. And then on the picture there on the other side, I'm standing upside down on the ice sheet, as I do like to play a little bit when I dive. I like to have a good time. The photographers hate it. They don't like to move that much. I like to get around and roll around and have a bit of fun. Of course, still with good buoyancy, guys. But, play on the ice. It's cool. It's fun. You're not going to get to do it in very many places. And it's a unique experience to walk inverted on an ice shelf. Great fun. And there's David's gal, not frozen at the surface, and there's that split you can see. So all those separations of the tectonic plates pulling the landmass apart under the water, and the two divers there either side. Again, cracking dive site. Now, one of the things we do at Magmadive is we do like to stay in touch with the manufacturers supplying your equipment. So we do work closely with a lot of companies. This here is Odin's Tier. This is a top secret dive site in Iceland. I'm not going to tell you where it is. If you want to dive it, you need to get in touch with Magmadive. But this site here we used for a Fourth Element shoot for their new wetsuits for free diving, and of course their Origin dry suit and the Argonaut dry suit system, which super nice neoprene suit that Fourth Element have designed, and you want to check that out online if you can have a look. But the Odin's Tier, as you see, nobody there. There's one person in the water, and that's where it's way out in the highlands of Iceland. It's a lake right up into the highlands, far away from all other tourist sites. So again, unique place to dive if you want to get in there and get those photographs without other tourists and other divers in the background. This is the place. This was a picture I actually like of my friend Becca. She was trying on the dry suits there at the dive show in Coventry in the UK. This is the last dive show we've been to in a while. We're hoping for the whole COVID thing to finish, and then we can start going to these events again. Gets us in touch with the dive community and to see what's going on. But webinars like this sort of make, it's a great opportunity to kind of have the same thing to let you guys see and hear information about all the sites going on. But hopefully the dive shows will come back soon and we can see some of you in person at some of the events. Of course, can't talk about Iceland without talking about Northern Lights. So when you're diving around the country, you are going to be staying overnight in some of these country hotels and places around Iceland, and those sort of dark environments at night here in the non-summer months, you're going to see these beautiful green aurora. And guys, I'm not kidding. It's one of my jobs that I took on for the last year that I've been working for the company, is to look after Northern Lights. I've taken a lot of photographs. Yes, there are bad days, but there are a lot of good days. We are so close to the edge of the Arctic Circle here that we're in prime viewing position to see these sort of beautiful lines cascading across the sky. Fantastic. So if you've never had a good Northern Lights photograph, you need to get yourselves to Iceland and grab that shot if you can. Stunning shots all over the country. There's a group that I had last year, and that's the bus in the background there, and of course the Northern Lights in the sky. So that's a picture that I took, guys. I'm not lying to you. The Northern Lights do exist, and they are that green when you see them by eye. And then, of course, the one on the right there was a customer who wanted the silhouette shot of him standing in front of the lights. And yeah, super place for photography. So my story, just to let you know that I'm not telling you a lot of rubbish. You know, I arrived in Iceland 4 years ago from Scotland. I worked in oil and gas diving, which is probably one of the most boring types of diving you could do anywhere. I was putting nuts and bolts together underwater, repairing stuff. You know, it was a long way off from my younger years where I was fun and diving abroad in hot countries. Took a break here in Iceland. It was supposed to be 6 months and I'm still here 4 months later. That tells you how great a country this is from my perspective. But the diving under the ice in the winter to these beautiful summer days at the waterfalls, and of course, there's nothing like diving in snow and ice. It's a weird sensation, and it's not as cold as you think it's going to be. It's actually quite comfortable. I was, as evidenced by the big smile on my face. I've had a haircut since then. That was, you know, a bit younger there in that picture with the hair. But yeah, between snowmobiling there, jumping in jumpsuits on top of a glacier, to ice climbing in the middle picture, rebreather diving there at Claflin Lake and in the south coast and Reykjanes Peninsula of Iceland, to going into caves, have been my story since the day I arrived. And I still do all these things. When I'm off in Iceland, it's what I do at the weekend. I get out there, I take photos, stay in nature. And one of these great things is such a spacious country. this brings me to my next point. The world has been in crisis. Of course, we're in crisis here in Iceland, and we're looking for things to do. We've been stuck at home. You know, we're missing getting out. We're missing traveling. And as divers, and certainly me as a diver, I want to get out there. I want to go diving. I have a holiday booked in November. We're on a liveaboard that I'm just hoping is going to run. And here in Iceland, we are opening up. We have no cases locally of COVID going on here in the country, and we're ready. We want to bring people back. We want to get the diving going again. I want to get back in the water. And so, you know, on the 1st of July, we are open. Even to you guys in America, you're all welcome to come back here to Iceland. And of course, pending on your own situation, of course, we welcome you here. And there, you know, it's not a busy place. The population is low, busy country, social distancing, not a problem here. And we're not worried. You know, this is a very safe place to be. Good practices and good techniques of what we're doing to keep ourselves safe is working. And it's worked for the last 3 months. So we're pretty happy and safe and ready to, you know, continue our diving lives. So hopefully we can get some of you back here into the country. Again, following my story, this is me and Aliska. She's from the Czech Republic, and she's here in Iceland. Again, enjoying some ice diving there. I challenged Aliska to climb out onto the ice shelf, which is not easy, by the way, with a full set of dive gear on. We're using our knives to kind of get up there on the ice, and that's me throwing my hands up in the air saying I made it, and Aliska's kind of crawling there on her knees. But she managed, and she'll be better next time. But super awesome diving there. And David's you've seen that. This is a bit more for the sci-fi fans. Yes, there are some caves in Iceland that look like Yoda. So if you're looking for some weird structures, the weirdness carries on all across the country. This is the Yoda Cave at Hjörleifshofti on the south coast, not far from Skogafoss waterfall in Victown. So if you're looking for something weird and wonderful for your photo banks, you can come and get a picture of Yoda, which out there is the Solheim Masandur beach, which is the black sand beach that they filmed the Rogue One fighting scenes on the beach. So a bit of movie history going on there. But before I say thank you, of course, media in Iceland, big thing. And if you do want to see some more shots of the country, you only have to watch things like Game of Thrones. Of course, The Amazing Race, a very old movie, but it's going to show you some of those grand waterfalls around the country. James Bond, that's going to get you onto those glaciers and the Jokersalon Diamond Beach and Glacier Lagoon. They on the frozen lake racing around, and some fancy cars. And on those James Bond movies, and then of course a lot of science fiction. Iceland really is another planet. It's like walking on the moon, Mars, you know, deep down into other oceanly environments. It's just another world altogether. And I love working here, and I'm not going to leave. So hopefully when you come to Iceland, I'm going to be one of the faces you see to help you get out and explore. And so thank you for watching my presentation, and I'm going to open the floor for some questions for those who have them.
Thanks so much, Nick. It was a beautiful presentation, and I know that there was so much more you could share. We could have honestly been here all night trying to cover all the different things that there are in Iceland to do topside as well. I think you shared a lot with us underwater, and like you said, it really is like nowhere else on Earth. It's absolutely magical. But I know, like topside, it's just you would have to have a year or more to truly explore everything there is to do. I'm just enamored with Iceland. So thank you.
Right. I'm 4 years here, and I still haven't seen everything. So
yeah. You know. I believe it. I believe it. Guys, we have the floor open for questions. So if there's anyone that has any questions, if you want to kind of raise your hand in the chat box or type it in the chat box or the Q&A box, we'll be glad to answer your questions. Nick, while we see if anybody has any questions, are you able to share a little bit about the whales that come by in the summer up north?
Yeah, of course. So the north is actually the best place to see the whales. If you're coming into the south, of course, we do see a regular uh, sort of movement of whales through the south coast, but they do tend to gather more in the north. So up in Akureyri and Stritton Dive, which is the two dive sites I showed you in the north, we have some boat departures there, and they're looking for the humpback whales, which tend to come mostly around the summer months, right up until about November. And then at the start of November, they do tend to disappear. But they come right into the fjords, and they're following the herring schools for feeding as they come into the fjords. But the humpback whale is a big one. We do also have a population of around about 5,000 killer whales in Iceland, but they tend to stay a little bit further out from the coastline. So there are some specific tours you can book to get yourselves a bit further away from the coast to see those killer whales. They're not staying too close to the coastline because they don't feed on seals here. They only feed on fish in Iceland. So they're again looking for the large schools of herring and cod that are swimming around the coastline of Iceland. So we do have those. Of course, we do also have dolphins, and we certainly have the smaller false killer whale, which is the sort of the big rounded head whale that sort of creeps around the coastline, and that's those are the more common ones that we see off the coastline. But the humpback whale is the most common. Those are the big guys. They're going to kind of float along and flop their tail in front of you on the boat and create a big splash, and they're happy to come and say hi in the water.
Fantastic. And nobody's asking it tonight, but one question we get a lot is if somebody wants to see the Northern Lights, when's the best time to come?
So we start our Northern Lights season from around the 15th of September. You can see them earlier than that, but the light and daylight hours are very limited up until about the 15th of September. So we tend to go by when it's going to be dark all night. So September is generally quite good because the weather hasn't gone bad yet. So the last 2 weeks of that month. Then sort of October is pretty good for seeing the Northern Lights. And then, as long as the weather is good, there's no cloud cover, pretty much from September right through until about April, you're going to have a chance to see the lights. As I said, we're right on the edge of the Arctic Circle, which is where that sort of ring of radiation forms around the Arctic rim of the planet in our atmosphere. And that's where we're going to see those green lights forming. We pretty much see them every night. Of course, they can be stronger or weaker, but they're kind of they're there all the time.
Fantastic, thank you. And just kind of FYI to anybody that's looking, I don't know if anybody's sort of done any research into getting to Iceland, but from the East Coast or even Chicago, we're talking about a 6.5 hour nonstop flight to Reykjavik. Things have changed a little bit. We'd have to see once schedules come back online as COVID hopefully starts to go away. But prior to that, normally you would leave in the evening about 10 o'clock at night, local time from the Midwest or East Coast. There are flights from LA and Dallas as well, but it takes a bit longer. But it was perfectly timed because you'd have a nighttime flight with the time difference. You'd land first thing in the morning, you'd have a full day. And then on the way home, time is on your side. You'd leave around 5 p.m. out of Reykjavik and you'd be home 9 or 10 p.m. the same day, local time. In the Midwest or Northeast. So you could theoretically, if you're like, okay, I want to see the Northern Lights and all that good stuff in the winter, but I also want to see the whales and the puffin migrations and all that good stuff in the summer. Theoretically speaking, you could do a couple of long weekends because the flights are not that tough, and then they weren't anyway very expensive at all. And with the time difference, you could kind of catch up on sleep both ends and maximize your time. So if anybody's been thinking about the flights and you think about Europe, I mean, Iceland is just a very quick, easy way to get to, and airfare is often phenomenal.
And just to point out as well, due to COVID, of course, and then companies encouraging people to try and come back, the exorbitantly high costs of Iceland have reduced dramatically at this time as well. So if you're looking for that cheap time to get to Iceland and you've not been able to afford it before, this is the time. You know, it is known for being quite expensive, but the companies are making deals, they're reducing costs, they are, you know, they're trying to get people back. This is what we want to do. We want to get people back out of their houses and back into traveling. So we're, you know, if you want a cheap time, this is the time to do it.
Yeah, that is fantastic news. That is really great news. I'm ready. I'm going to lift this stuff up as soon as we hang up. I'm ready to come back. So.